Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's great to see you all here, all that I can see and the ones that I can't. Welcome. My name is Daniel Roth. I'm a program manager on the ASP.NET team. And today it's my pleasure to talk to you about what's new in web development with ASP.NET Core 2.1. ASP.NET Core is our cross-platform and open source web framework for .NET. We built it to be a unified framework. It can handle all of your web development needs. It can do web UI. It can do web APIs and HTTP services, RESTful services. It can do real-time web. It can do back-end microservices. We built it to be fast. We built it to be reliable. We built it to be secure. Now, it runs on .NET Core, and in fact, it's included with the .NET Core runtime. But that doesn't mean you're limited to .NET Core. If you want to use ASP.NET Core on the .NET Framework, you can. And that's thanks to the fact that ASP.NET Core is really just a bunch of .NET standard libraries. And so you can use them wherever .NET Standard 2.0 is supported. And it includes a variety of frameworks that help you do web development. If you're building web UI, we give you MVC. We give you Razor pages. If you're building HTTP services, RESTful services, web APIs, you can use the web API support in ASP.NET Core. And there are other frameworks as well. For the last release, we've had a bit of a gap, a hole. We didn't really have a solution yet for doing real-time web. But in ASP.NET Core 2.1, we've filled that gap. SignalR is now shipping with 2.1, and with the release candidate yesterday, you can try it out. Now, of course, there's a whole bunch of other new stuff that's in this release, not just SignalR. Razor class libraries is a way where you can take your web UI, like your Razor pages, your MVC views, and you can compile them into a reusable library. In fact, you can then package it up as a NuGet package and share it on NuGet.org so that all your friends and colleagues and the community can take advantage of your good work. We've even started using this feature ourselves. We took all of the identity code that used to live in our project templates, the hundreds of files and thousands of lines of code that made up the identity UI for doing registering users and logging in users and managing identities. We packaged that up as a library, as a package that you can just add to an existing application and get the identity UI by just adding a package. We've also added scaffolding for identity so that you can scaffold the whole identity UI back if you want all the code, because you want that flexibility, or if you want to override individual pages. The Razor class library feature allows you to override individual pages or views from the library within your own application. Security is more important than ever before. We decided in this release that HTTPS was going to be on by default, even during development. There's a variety of reasons for doing that. I mean, you want your websites to be secure. Browsers are becoming more and more strict about enforcing that websites should be secure. If you want to be up in the page rankings, you need to have an HTTPS site. Also, they'll shame you a little bit if you don't have a secure connection with the user. So we try to help you with that by turning on HTTPS by default. That includes several features. We give you HTTPS redirection middleware, so we handle the redirection from HTTP to HTTPS. We also give you HTTP Strict Transport Security Support, or HSTS, which is basically a way to have the browser enforce that your site should be accessed over HTTPS. Down in Kestrel, in our web server, we've also added support for SNI, which is the server name indication, I think is the I. I always think the I is identification, but I think it's indication, is now available. So you can have multiple host names and multiple certificates hosted by ASP.NET Core. HTTPS isn't just important for security, though. It's also important for privacy. With the EU General Data Protection Regulation, there is now a requirement actually to have your users' data protected by HTTPS. And we've done other things in our project templates to try and help you out with satisfying those EU GDPR requirements, like giving you the ability to deal with cookie consent policy, having users be able to delete their accounts and download their data. You need to be able to test your apps. So we've made it really, really simple to test ASP.NET Core applications completely in memory. And this includes even rendering your MVC views or your Razor pages. We give you a web application factory that you can get an HTTP client from and invoke your entire app all in memory for doing end-to-end functional testing. We've added some convenient API conventions when you're doing web API development so that you have a much more descriptive and precise API. Your apps also need to be able to do outbound calls. So a new feature is the IHP Client Factory. This is a way for you to centrally manage and configure all of the HTTP client instances in your application. Kestrel is now re-implemented on top of managed sockets. We have removed the libuv dependency, and we hope that will mean that we can take .NET Core and ASP.NET Core to even more places. And we expect also to enable additional performance improvements in the future. We've abstracted away from the ASP.NET Core hosting layer a generic hosting API, a generic host builder. What this enables you to do is if you want to host a service, but it's not HTTP related, you can use this API and still get dependency injection, still get configuration, still get logging, but host whatever you want. Like maybe you want a service that is handling messages from a queue. You can do that with this new generic host builder API, and we hope that it will pave the way for us to do things like enable support for other transports and other patterns when using ASP.NET Core on the server. Performance is improved across the board, and we've updated our SPA templates to leverage the latest CLIs from the single-page application frameworks like Angular and React. Whew, that's a lot of stuff. Of course, it's a lot easier to see it. So let's do that. You can see it as well, by the way. If you haven't already downloaded and installed .NET Core 2.1, you should. The release candidate went out yesterday. There's a link on the screen, the aka.ms/.NET Core 2.1. If you go there and download it, there's actually a free poster, a coveted poster with all of the .NET Scots signatures on this poster that you could potentially win. So download it today if you can. It's a lot of fun to use. Also, this release is go live. So you can take these bits, you can put them in production with the understanding that when we ship the RTM version, the final version that you will, of course, then upgrade. We expect very few changes in the APIs and in the framework at this point. I think we expect that if everything goes smoothly with the release candidate, that we will then ship a stable release of 2.1 probably by the end of this month. So go download it and install it if you haven't already. And let's go start take a deeper look at some of these features. So the first thing I want to show you is ASP.NET Core SignalR. This is our real-time web framework for ASP.NET Core. This is a scenarios where you want to have connected clients that the server can push content to the clients. That may be notifications, that might be broadcasting messages. It's a connected client pattern. Now, this is a port of ASP.NET SignalR that we've had for a while on ASP.NET to ASP.NET Core. But of course, we couldn't just port it. We had to make it better. So there are a bunch of new features in ASP.NET Core SignalR. The JavaScript TypeScript client for ASP.NET Core SignalR has no jQuery dependency. It's just a pure JavaScript client, and it is significantly faster. We've implemented, in addition to the plain text JSON protocol, we now have a binary protocol implementation based off of message pack, which should enable you to squeeze out even more performance for these scenarios. The whole protocol is actually open and publicly documented now on GitHub. So if you want to just go implement the protocol yourself with your own client, you can now do that. There's support for streaming and also a simplified scale-out model. In fact, the scale-out model is so simple that you may not even need to do it yourself. Because we provide you now a fully managed SignalR service. It's in preview. This is the Azure SignalR service, and it is managed SignalR. It will take care of all of your scale-out needs on the back end. Remember, you have all these connected clients, so scale-out with those scenarios tends to be a big issue. But this is a service that's built to scale to 10 users, 100 users, thousands, hundreds of thousands of users, all just there. You build the same way that you would any other ASP.NET Core SignalR application, and then you change like a line or two of code, and then you can publish it up to the server. So pretty cool. You should check that out as well. Let's do a quick look at SignalR, and I'll show you how you can get started. All right. Great. So if you haven't already, you should go to this page, right? aka.ms. .NET Core 2.1, and that will take you here, and you should download. There's the poster with, I think it's, how is it, Guthrie, Hanselman. I think it's a little hard to tell. They look kind of the same, don't they? I think that's Hunter, and that's Anders as well. So if you want to get that poster, you should definitely go download and install it today. I've already done that. I've also downloaded and installed Update 7 to Visual Studio 2017. You do need that when working with ASP.NET Core 2.1. If you're on a Mac, you can go get Visual Studio for Mac 7.5. All right, let's create a new app. And my goal here with this demo is just to show you how easy it is to get started with SignalR. So let's create a new SignalR demo app. OK. Now here's the File New Project dialog for ASP.NET Core. You notice I've got 2.1 selected at the top. I'm just going to create a web app, and I am going to turn on authentication for this app. Because what I want to do is I want to create a simple chat app, and I want to take advantage of the user's identity as part of that application. So let's go ahead and do that. And that will create me a simple little web app with support for identity. OK, now I don't have to add any packages to this application to get SignalR, because it's already included in the ASP.NET Core meta packages. If I go digging around in the dependencies under NuGet, under the .app meta package, somewhere down here, let's see, ASP.NET Core, Signal, whoa, stop, OK, SignalR, there it is. Right there, that guy. Let me zoom in so you can see it. That's SignalR. It's already there. Now, don't be scared because you're like, holy cow, look at all those packages. Remember, ASP.NET Core is included with the .NET Core runtime. All this stuff is actually already there. All Visual Studio is doing here is surfacing to you all the functionality that is available to you. All right? So SignalR, it's already included as a package, so we should be able to go ahead and use it. So let's add a class, and we're going to create a SignalR hub. So let's call this Chat Hub. Great. And then we want this to be a hub. There's Microsoft ASP.NET Core SignalR. Great. Now I'm going to save a little typing time. I've got some snippets here in Visual Studio Code that I'm just going to copy in. I'm going to copy in the methods for my hub that I want to use. And let's take a look at what these things do. OK, so we have a couple of events that we're hooking into, on connected and on disconnected. This is when a client connects or disconnects to the hub, these events fire. And so this hub will then broadcast to all the already connected clients that, what does it say? It says that, well, if they connect, then this user has joined. It's letting everyone know that, Dan Roth 27 is now available. And when they disconnect, the left send action is then sent out. When someone sends a message to this chat hub, then that message also gets broadcast to all of the clients. That's what that last line is doing. Okay. Now I want this to be a secure hub, so I'm going to put authorize on here, and we'll take advantage of that. Great. All right. So now we have our hub. Okay. Now I need to actually make that hub available. Like it needs a route. It needs a place that you can actually send connect requests to. So we do that in our startup class. So I'm going to go into the configure method where all my other middleware is set up. So here's configure. Down at the bottom, I'm going to say app.use SignalR. And in here, we have an opportunity to configure our SignalR route. SignalR is built on top of ASP.NET Core routing, much in the same way that MVC is. So routes, and I can do a little Lambda method here to set up my routes. And what do I want to do? I want to do routes.map hub. That looks good. Let's see if I can move it up for the people in the back. They're having trouble seeing. All right, map hub. And it's a map hub of T. So the chat hub is the hub I want to surface here. And then I can specify the path. Let's do it at hubs chat. I think that's what I want. OK? So now my hub is surfaced. Oh, do I probably have to add the SignalR services as well? Because most things in ASP.NET Core are sort of a two-phase addition. So let's do services.add SignalR. Great. All right, cool. So now we have SignalR set up. Now we need to build the actual chat client that can talk to that hub. So let's just do this on the index page. Let's go to pages, index. This is a little bit of Razor. It's got a whole bunch of stuff in here. We're just going to get rid of all that. And I've got a simplified example that we'll use here. Let's do this one. All right. So page, it has the index model, and it just has a form with an input and a button. This is how you send your messages in this little simple chat app. And then it has an unordered list where it will post all the messages that have been sent out from the hub, and then a couple of scripts that are needed to make this all work. So first of all, we need the SignalR client. We need the JavaScript client for SignalR. That's how we're going to implement the browser side of this application. Where do we get that? Well, currently it's available on NPM. So if you just want the file, the easiest way to do it is to just restore the npm package and then grab the file out of the package. I've already done that, so let's just add it to the app. So let's add a SignalR folder here. And then we will add signalr.js. Let's add an existing item. And I think I just have it on my desktop someplace. Here. I guess I put it. Yeah, so this is my node modules folder where I restored it previously. SignalR, disk, browser. There it is. All right, great. All right, so now we've got SignalR, but we also need to actually use the SignalR client. We need to implement our client-side logic. So let's add a chat.js file. Now, I'm not going to code that on the fly. I've already got one that I'm just going to add. So let's add, again, an existing item. And let's go back up to here. And there's my chat.js. And we'll take a look at what this app's got. Oh, I think my namespace is wrong. So we'll just change this to SignalR demo instead of SignalR demo test. And that should make that now happy. Great. OK. So if we look at chat.js, what does this have in it? It has nothing. Oh, OK. So that's always fun. Fortunately, we've got a little backup that we will put in there. So there we go. Otherwise, that could have been really exciting. All right, so what does this piece of JavaScript do? So it's grabbing a bunch of DOM elements, right? It's grabbing the form that we saw in the index.cshtml file. It's grabbing the send button. It's grabbing the list of messages, that unordered list, and it's grabbing the text box. And then it has a little helper method here that's just appending list items to the list. That's how it adds that someone had chatted something or that someone came online or left. And then here's where we start actually using the SignalR client. We create a hub connection. There's that route that we set up previously. So this is the call that the connection that will actually go talk to the hub and set up a client connection. And then we just add a couple of event listeners. So when the form is submitted, then what do we want to do? Well, let's grab the message from the text box. We'll clear out the text box because we've already captured it in this variable. And then we will do connection.send and send that message to all the other clients. OK? When the connection receives a send message event from the hub, then it adds that to its list of events. And when the connection receives a send action event from the hub, that's like someone left or someone joined, it adds that to the list as well. And then here's where the connection actually gets started. And then it enables the UI so that you can actually start clicking into things. OK, that should work. Let's try it. No. Why is there always a missing semicolon? OK, so there we go. Thank you, whoever was shouting out that I missed a semicolon. It's great. Build started. We're running. OK, so it's disabled right now because I can't currently connect because I'm not logged in. I need to actually create a user. So let's create a user. We're just using the built-in support for ASP.NET Core Identity. And this is my quickie password. All right. And we have to apply migrations because this is identity. It uses the database. Refresh the page. Cool. All right. So, and it even says that I have joined. So the message was sent to the hub, or the connection was made to the hub, and it broadcasts that to all the clients, of which there is only one. Let's add another one. So I'm going to pop up a different browser. Let's get our good old friend IE and put this up side by side. And for IE, let's create another user, DARoth2. Yeah, that's what I used before, it looks like. Good. All right, register that. OK, and so you see how it showed up on the other side that DARoth2 has joined. We can send messages like, hi there. And it's like, hi there, how's it going? And then, need sleep. That would be great. And then if I disconnect, it says that DARoth2 has left. So that's all you need to do to get going with SignalR. There's actually a really nice repo. I think it's SignalR samples. ASP.NET SignalR samples. Did I get that right? Yeah, this repo. So ASP.NET SignalR samples repo that has all sorts of really fun ASP.NET Core samples that you can go try out. Like there's chat, there's like moving shapes around, all those types of things. So go check that out. Cool. Now that was admittedly a pretty simple and lightweight introduction to SignalR. That's because after this talk, there is a whole session about ASP.NET Core SignalR being presented by my good friends Damian Edwards and David Fowler. You should definitely check it out. It'll be in the same room right after this session is done, and they'll show you the SignalR service and all the fancy features that SignalR has to offer. Well, let's go take a look at Razor class libraries now. So Razor class libraries are a way for you to take some UI that's implemented as an MVC view or a class library, compile it into a library that you can then share, that you can then reuse. It works with views and Razor pages, and you can override any of the views or pages that are in that library from your application. So you're not stuck with whatever the person who built that library originally designed. You can tweak it, you can change it, you can mess with it. In RC1, this release candidate that we shipped yesterday, we actually added a new project template for building Razor class libraries that's now available, and I'll show that to you now. Okie doke. So let's create a new project. Yeah, web application 2 should be fine. And in this case, we're just, let's start out with just a web app, and then we'll add a Razor class library to it. We'll create some reusable UI and reference it from this project. Okay, so we have now a web application. It's got its UI, which is the standard home about and contact pages. Let's now add another project. And let's call this one Razor Lib, my Razor Lib demo thing. I think that's long enough that it won't conflict with any other project names on my machine. And that looks good. So there was that Razor class library template that I just selected in the dialog, and now we've got a little class library. But this class library, instead of containing just C# files, it also contains CSHTML files or Razor files. Like here is a Razor page that's being compiled in this class library. And it doesn't have much in it right now. You can tell it's Razor pages. It's got some Razor-y like things, but it doesn't even have any content. We can add a little bit of content here, like page 1 from Razor class library. And let's do like on H2, like at datetime.now. Let's just display the current time. And then all we need to do to use that UI within our application is to add a project reference. So let's go ahead and do that. Boop and boop. All right, we'll let that restore. Okay, good. So notice that the Razor page in this class library is currently set up in an area, like it's under an areas folder. So I would expect that the route to this page would be /myfeature/page1. That's what you would expect. Now, why did we do it that way? I'll explain that in just a little bit. But that's what we would expect the route to be. So if I run this, fingers crossed. All right, so there's the normal apps UI. If I, my feature/page1, I think is what I said it was. Yeah, and there it is. Okay, and I can refresh, and you can see the time ticks every time I refresh. So that's a CSHTML file that's being built in a class library and then referenced by a project and being reused. And that's pretty simple. It's not doing very much. Let's do something a little bit more complicated. I actually was playing around with this earlier because I wanted to try out views and Razor pages and partials and all those things. So I'm going to add an existing project that I built previously. I'm going to build this Razor Lib1 project. Let's just add this guy. All right, cool. And so this guy's got quite a bit more going on. It has that same area. I didn't change that. But it has a home controller, which returns a view. It has the views for that home controller. Like there's the index CSHTML. It just basically says MVC view from class lib, and then has a partial view that it's rendering inside of it. Cool thing to note that I didn't actually have on the feature list, but we have a new partial tag helper in ASP.NET Core 2.1, which makes it a lot easier to render partials. So definitely check that out. What else? And then I think it has the page that we had previously, but this page was updated also to use the partial. And in the partial is sitting inside the views shared folder. Here, I'll zoom in a little bit for folks in the back who couldn't see any of that while I was clicking around, okay? And the controller was in there as well, all right? So that's what's in there. So let's switch up the reference. I'm gonna remove reference. I'm going to remove the new project I just created and use this new one. Okie doke. And then let's Control F5 again. All right. And now we should be able to go to my feature page 1, and that should have so now it has actually, this actually also has a layout. It didn't mention that. So I added a layout to, where is it? View, yeah, view shared layout. You guys see the layout there? So it has its own little layout. I mean, the layout doesn't do very much, but it has one. It has its own view start file. So at least the title is showing up in the tab now, and that partial view is now being rendered as well. Okay, so what's cool now, though, is, I mean, this layout stinks. Let's have this UI pick up the layout from my app. And we're going to do that by overriding the UI that comes with this class library that I built. So let's go now into the application, and let's add some folders. So let's add, whoops, I don't want to manage NuGet packages. Let's add, we're basically going to match the folder structure that is in the Razor class library. So we need areas. Let's add, was it my feature? And then we'll add, I think we'll just do the views folder and shared. Add folder, shared. Okay, great. Now, to have this class library pick up my layout, all I need to do is like set the little layout property in each of the pages. And I can do that using a view start file. So let's add a overriding view start file. So add new item. Start, I think we'll make it fine. Yeah, so Razor view start file, that looks good. Okay, and so now what we want to do is this, we want to point this layout property at the layout for the app, not the layout that came with the class library. So let's do, what is it? It's probably, it's probably pages shared underscore layout dot CSHTML. I think that's where it is. Did I get it right? Let's see, pages shared. Yeah, so there's the apps layout file sitting under that shared folder. Okay, good. So that should mean now, just by, I don't think I even need to rebuild. Oh, what did I do wrong? Could not be logo, CSHTML, areas, my feature. Oh, no. Where did I put this wrong? So that's in web app. Pages, shared. Anyone see the bug?
Try the root.
Try the root, you think? Like that? Is that necessary? I don't remember. Well, let's rerun. Whoops. And now I'm getting a 404. So it doesn't like that either. What did I do wrong here? What did I do wrong? Tilde? No, I don't think so. Well, we can try it. We can try it. Ah, shoot. CSHTML layout. That looks right. That looks right. Wait, did I get the area right? My areas, feature, views. Is it in the right folder? It's under my there. Flavor lib1, views, view start. That looks right to me. Hold on. What's that? It's the view start. I don't want to actually under views. Like I want it to override this view start. So I want that to match, and that looks like that matches. My feature views. That looks fine. Why is it not matching? Let me do something real quick. Let me clean. Let's make sure this is not like just a weird tooling thing that's happening. This is web application 2, I think. Okay, and let's rerun it. Building, suspense. My feature, page 1. Yeah, okay. So I don't know. I think the tooling got kind of out of sync there. Like maybe when the build servers like choked and died or whatever. But so now it's picking up my apps layout. So that's cool. Okay. Now this override me thing is a partial. I should be able to override that partial view. Shall we try it? Is that going to work? Well, let's see. So let's go into the not that one, so I don't get confused. I want to grab the partial view from the class library that I'm using. It's this override me file. Let's copy it into shared. And in here, let's change the text to "You have been overridden." Okay? And I should just be able to save that. And if I refresh the browser, yeah! Okay, cool. So that's Razor class libraries with overrides. All right, cool. Whew. Thank you for the people that helped out. Now, like I said, we use this feature ourselves. We use this feature for the identity UI. In days of yore, we used to include all of the identity UI code in your project templates. And that was nice in terms of flexibility, not so nice in terms of how much stuff you had to check into source control. Also, if you then later decided after already starting a project, you're like, oh, I wanted identity, but I forgot. So what do? Well, you probably went off and created another project with identity and copied all the code over. Wouldn't it be nice if there was an easier way? We have pre-built the identity UI as a package. We also provide you a scaffolder that can scaffold all the code out if you prefer to have all the code. And then you can scaffold individual pages if you want to override like just one page. And let's take a look at what that looks like. You can then use these things to add identity to an existing project. All right. Let's do file new project again. Web app 3 sounds lovely. Nah, we don't need to save that one. And this time let's add identity to this app, just like we did before with the SignalR app. And let's take a look at how that works. Where is the identity UI coming from? Well, it looks like there is an areas folder in this project template. What's in there? Oh, like it looks like it has an identity folder, Dan. Like there's probably like a gajillion files in here. Oh no, wait, there's just one file. This is just the same as you saw before. This is a view start file that's overriding the layout from the default identity UI and changing it to use the one from the app. That's all it's doing. And yes, whoever said that you need a leading slash looks like you are in fact correct, which is great. Now, where is the identity UI package? Well, it's included by default with the ASP.NET Core meta packages. So if you, again, go digging around in the NuGet dependencies, we should see it, ASP.NET Core identity UI. There it is right there. So that's the package that has all the pre-built Razor pages. All right, great. So we can run this. Let's just make sure that this app is functioning. And then let's tweak it a little bit. Let's override some of the pages from the UI. OK, so login looks like the normal login page. It's working. And so we have an app with identity with very little additional code being added to it. It's just adding a package. But we can tweak that UI. So let's collapse this. And let's, what page do we want to change? Let's change that login page. So let's do add new scaffolded item. OK? Whoops. Add new scaffolded item. And identity is what you want to select, and there's our identity scaffolder. And if we say add, this will give us this dialog, which lets you scaffold any page from the identity UI that you would like. So first off, let's make sure we continue to use our layout. So in this top text box, I'm going to go into my pages shared folder and say, this is the layout I would like to be used by the scaffolded code. And I can pick what any page I'd like. Let's just do login. Yep. And for the data context class, we already have one. So let's just select the one we've already got and click OK. OK. And so that should scaffold for me essentially a single page. OK, so there's a README file here. Maybe there's some additional stuff I need to do. This is telling me that I need to have static files. I've already got that. I need to say use authentication. I've already got that because I had set up this project with authentication from the start. And I need to use MVC. OK, check, check, check. Those are all good. We can close this. Ignore it. What did we get in terms of generated files? Oh, yeah. So it looks like I now have an account folder. And there's the login page that I want. Let's tweak it a little bit to suit our fancy. Well, that's the yeah, so let's do an H3, a much better login page. OK? And save that. And then what are these other files? There's some more stuff here. Well, this view imports, that's just bringing in using statements that are needed by that particular login page. Same thing with this view imports. It's bringing in the necessary tag helpers. This view start is setting up the layout for that particular view. OK, that all looks good. The only file that's a little fancy is this identity hosting startup file. What is this guy? So this is a class that implements iHosting startup, which is an interface that's recognized by the ASP.NET Core hosting layer. What this interface allows you to do is ASP.NET Core hosting, that's the part that like you build up a web application, a web host builder, you tell it what server you want to use and what startup class and what environment you want, and you build a host and you tell it to start and it starts listening for requests. If you have an iHosting startup implementation, you can participate in that process without actually having to go modify program CS. That's what this does. So that's nice when you want to, for example, compose additional services on top of an existing application. So if we look in here, there's a configure services method that's being called on the web host builder for the app, and it's making sure that all the necessary MVC and cookie-related services are all there that the generated code needs. So that's what that guy's doing. OK, did it work? Did it work is what we want to know. I think I should just be able to refresh. So it says use a local login account, login, and process failure. So okay, I guess I think that just means that IIS was no longer running, that it stopped. Let's go to the login page, and we have a much better login page. Okay, so that's how you can customize like individual pages. What if you started without identity at all and you want to add it? You can do that too. So let's do a new project, except this time let's not add any identity to it at all, and we're going to add identity after the fact, after creating the project. So no authentication, right? No authentication. And let's go ahead and create a new project. All right, and then here, just wait for the packages to restore. And there they go. OK, so we were coding. We built lots of cool stuff. We realized we needed identity. So now we can add new scaffolded item, identity. That looks good. Let's make sure that we continue to use our layout that we already have. That's under the shared folder. So there's that. OK. I don't want to override anything. I basically just want the default identity UI for this demo. If I wanted all the code, I could just select override all files, and that would give me all the code. But I really just want the default identity UI and the wire up code. I don't have a database context class, so let's create a new one. That looks fine, sure, and add. So it's building my app, it's looking what's already there, figuring what it needs to add, and generating the code. And let's see now what we get. OK, so our README has a few more steps, because it doesn't know, like, do you have these things already? Like, do we have static files? Yes, we have static files. Do we use authentication? No, we don't do that. Like, so with the iHosting startup, we can compose services, but it can't really change your middleware pipeline, because those things are ordered. And so trying to parse that file and deal with it isn't something you can do with the iHosting startup. So any middleware that needs to be added, we've got to do that ourselves. So no problem. It says to add it after the static file middleware. So let's do this here. That looks good. What else do we need to do? Make sure MVC is set up. That's fine. We've already done that. Oh, we have a database. So we need to actually run migrations. Fortunately, the instructions for doing that are right here. I can do it from the command line, or I could do it from Visual Studio using the NuGet package manager. Let's use the Visual Studio version. So this is basically like a little mini PowerShell inside of ES. And what do I got to type here? So add migration. Let's call it what they recommend. Create identity schema. OK, so this is going to generate code for initializing the database and the table schema that's needed for identity. I would like this code to live with the database. If I look in the generated code from scaffolding, I think that, yeah, the data folder with the DB context is in that identity area. So all of your identity concerns are in one place. They're not scattered about your app. So I'd like my migrations to live there. So I'm going to say output directory. I want it to be areas, identity, data, migrations is where I want to put my migrations, because that's how I like it. Let's do that. Build failed. Probably means a semicolon. A semicolon, again. All right, let's make sure it builds. It will this time. It was the only semicolon it was missing. There, OK. So now let's add the migration. OK, cool. So it looks like it added the migration code to the right spot. You can see it over here in the Solution Explorer. All right, so now we need to apply the migration. So we do update. Is it update database, I think? Let's check the README. Yep, update database. And that should create the database for me and apply the migration. One thing that the README doesn't tell you to do that I think is a good idea is if you're going to be dealing with a database, I recommend adding the database error page middleware to your application in the development environment. That's super convenient. It can handle applying migrations when you forgot to apply them. It can help you deal with some of the, woo, look at all the SQL flyby. That was cool. It can help you, diagnose various problems. So I'm going to do that as well, just in case we have any issues. So here, while I'm in development, in addition to the developer exception page, I would like to app.use was it database error page? Okay, great. All right, so that should be it. I should have identity set up. Let's see. Run it. Okay. Well, I don't have register and login. That's because that's actually part of the app, right? Like there's a login partial that you need to include in your layout. It didn't change my layout, which I'm actually kind of grateful for because I don't want it mucking with my layout. But did it give me the login partial? Let's see. So if I look in the pages folder, shared, yeah. So there's the login partial that the scaffolder added to my app. So I just need to add that to my layout. So let's go do that under here. I think after the home, about, and contact links. Yeah. Let's put it right here. I can use that partial tag helper again. Partial name equals login partial. Okay, great. Refresh. And we have our register and login pages. We can create users just to prove that this is not just a register page with nothing behind it. There's a fully baked identity solution. There it is, and we can manage our users and all those things. Okay? So that's how you can add identity to an existing application in case you forgot. Cool. Let's talk a little bit more about security and about privacy. So remember I said that HTTPS is now enabled by ASP.NET Core 2.1 by default. We encourage you to develop under HTTPS so that you can flesh out all those issues that are specific to an HTTPS environment, because you're probably going to be wanting to run in production with HTTPS. We have support for HTTPS redirection, for HSTS, and SNI now in 2.1. We've also done a bunch of work to help you with GDPR compliance. We help you with a UI for handling cookie consent. And we've added features to identity so that users can download or delete their data. We did also add some extensibility so that if you want to handle encryption of your identity data, you can. Just a word of caution that that is not a trivial task. We highly recommend that if you can leverage the encryption support from your underlying data store, whether that's SQL Azure or Cosmos DB or whatever, that's probably the way to go. But if you feel like a challenge, by all means, the extensibility point is there. So let's take a look at these features. Okay, so to start out, I just want to show that HTTPS really is enabled by default. So let's pop up just a command prompt here, and I should make this bigger. Oh, and I should switch the screen so that it's not secret. How's that? Let me make it a little bigger. Let's do 28 so the people in the back can see. Okay, cool. No, it's so big, it barely fits. All right, so let's go to the desktop, and I'm just going to create like a vanilla web app. So .NET new web, and let's call it web app. I don't know how many I have on my desktop, so let's call it the 10th one. Okay, so this will create me a web app. Great. Now let's go into that folder, and let's just run it and see what happens. All right, so one thing I hope you notice that's different is it's not just listening on HTTP, it's also listening on HTTPS. It's listening on port 5000 and on port 5001. When you install the .NET Core 2.1 SDK, we provision a development certificate for you. Much in the same way that like IS Express provisions a development certificate for you on Windows, we give you one but cross-platform. So it works on Windows, on Mac, and Linux. And then we don't handle establishing trust for that certificate, because that's really something that requires user interaction. But we do give you a tool for dealing with that, and that's the dev certs tool. So let me just prove that this actually is doing something, and it's not just saying it's listening on port 5000 and 5001. So if we go to 5000, we see hello world. If we go to HTTPS, localhost 5001, we get the version of hello world, but with the actual lock icon as opposed to the icon of shame. Okay, great. So that's working. To establish trust for your developer certificate, you use this .NET Dev Certs tool. There it is. You can see it takes a single command to manage HTTPS certificates. So we can do .NET Dev Certs HTTPS, and if I run that, it says you already have a valid certificate. It's already present on your machine. And that happened as part of installing the .NET Core SDK as part of the first run experience. If you happen to have that turned off, you may have to do this manually. To establish trust for the certificate, you pass the, let's see, .NET Dev Certs HTTPS. Let's look at the help text. You pass this -t parameter or -- trust. And what that will do on Windows is that will copy the certificate into the trusted root store so that the browsers, when you're doing development, won't complain and say, like, you're using an untrusted certificate. Danger, danger. On Mac, it will deal with the keychain. On Linux, we can't actually do that for you because it's different for every distro and every browser, so you have to set that up in a distro-specific way. But at least for Windows and Mac, you can just run this tool and it will set up the certificate for you. Visual Studio will also handle this for you. When you first run an application with HTTPS using Visual Studio 2017 Update 7, it will prompt you and say, hey, would you like me to establish trust for the IS Express cert and for the ASP.NET Core development cert? And if you say yes, then it does that all for you, and then you never see those prompts again, and you're good to go. All right, so that's how that's handled. Now, if we look at a slightly more involved application, what is this? This one? Yeah, this one's good because this one has identity. We were playing around with identity before. So when we do file new project and select a full web app, we get more than just an HTTPS and an HTTP endpoint. If we look in the startup configure method, you'll see that there's HTTPS redirection middleware that will handle bouncing HTTP requests to the HTTPS endpoint. And it's intelligent, like it knows what ports Kestrel is listening on. If you are handling HTTPS at the edge, then you can configure it with a port explicitly so it knows where to do that redirect to. There's also use HSTS. That's only done in production, not during development, but that's a way for the server to tell the browser, like, you should enforce HTTPS, like, no requests should come to me that are over HTTP, and then browsers will enforce that client side. So that's kind of cool. And I think, well, let's look at this app and just see the redirect in action. Okay, what is the HTTP address for this application? What is it? Let's look in the launch settings.json file. This is it here. There's the HTTPS port. So, okay, and this is the most dangerous part of my demo sequence because if I hit Control-4, then it zooms in live. If I hit Function 4, it seems to turn off my machine. So, watch it carefully. I'm going to hit Enter. It should bounce to the HTTPS address, and there it did it. Did you see it? Some people said yes. Other people didn't know. So one more time. Boink. So there it does the HTTPS redirection for you. So we just handle that for you. Control-4. Okay, great. Awesome. Yeah. Now, what about GDPR requirements? I'm logged in as a user. Let's take a look at a couple of things. Oh, well, first of all, let me log out. There's no consent UI here for cookies right now, and I have a login system. I'm using cookies, so I probably should have that. That's because I've already consented previously. If I just go in and let's just go into the debugger, into my cookies, and look there. Like you can see, there's a consent cookie that's been established. You establish consent for cookies with cookies, of course. So let's delete all the cookies just so that we can see what the UI looks like. So if we now refresh the application. So now we get this banner at the top that says, you're using cookies, or you can put whatever text there you want. You can learn more about the privacy policy for this application. This is a page that's in the template that you can customize as you see fit, and the user can then accept that policy. That's all handled by this cookie compliance policy. Where is it? This thing. This cookie policy options service that we set up in the application for you. And that will make, you can then flag all of your cookies as essential or non-essential. If the user doesn't accept the policy, then none of the non-essential cookies will fly, whereas the essential ones will. What else can we do? Well, if we log back in, and let's do what about my data as a user? if we look at the Manage page, you'll see that there's a Personal Data tab now with 2 buttons. I can download all of my personal data, and that will just download a JSON file with all of my user profile data that's stored in ASP.NET Core Identity. And there are extensibility points, like if you're customizing the user profile a lot, you can customize what data gets downloaded here as well. Also, you can just delete the user, and the user will then be gone from the system. So again, things that just help you deal with privacy concerns for the user and compliance with the EU GDPR requirements. Awesome. Functional testing. You know, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to skip this one because it was shown in the previous keynote with Scott Hunter and Scott Hansman, but I'll talk to it really briefly. This is just a really easy way where if you have a web application and you want to do a full end-to-end functional test, like you actually want to issue an HTTP request to it, you want to send headers and see the response headers and get the fully rendered view or Razor page from the application, you can do that with ASP.NET Core. And we've made it trivial with this release. We give you a web application factory that you can use to create an HTTP client instance that will then invoke the entire application end-to-end, including runtime compilation of Razor and all those things. It was possible to do before with previous releases. It was just really hard. This makes it trivial. One convention that you do need to conform to use this feature is your program class, your entry point class, needs to have a helper method on it by convention that's this create web host builder function. That's what the web application factory will use to get its hands on the web host builder for your application. So make sure you have that. All of our project templates have it, so if you want to add it to an existing application, you can just look at an existing template and add that to your application. Okay, and I think I'm gonna, let's do it. Let's do it, why not? How hard can it be? Okay, let's just do it. We have an app, let's add a project. New project, let's add a .NET Core XUnit test project. We're gonna test the app that we just created. So there we go. All right, now we need to do a few tweaks to this guy. First, it needs a reference to the app. So let's add a reference. It will complain about that because by default, this test project is targeting .NET Core 2.0, and I need it to target 2.1 because my app is targeting 2.1. So let's switch that. That looks good. Save that. And then we need to add a package, which is our testing package. So add manage NuGet. Where's the manage? Manage NuGet packages. And this package is called Microsoft ASP.NET Core MVC testing. Okay, that's the package we need. That has the new web application factory in it. Let's install that into our app. Yes, I accept your terms. Great. Okay, last tweak. This one's a little uglier. This is a little bit manual. We really should have a web test project that just does this for you. We will have one. We weren't able to get it into this release, so one more tweak you have to do to your project file, you need to change the SDK to web. And then in addition to having the testing package, you need to actually have a reference to .app as well. It's just needed. You don't actually need a version on .app now because the version of .app is actually implied by the web SDK that you're using. So that's the one last tweak that you should that you'll need. Okay, now we should be unblocked to write our test. Go, 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 go. So I class fixture. Right. Yes, and this the fixture that I want is this new web application. That is a really big text box that's in my way. There we go. And this is from that testing package. And it takes its own generic parameter, and this should be the entry type for the app that you're trying to test, so program. And which program do we want? We want the one from my app. Which one's from my app? Which one's from web application 4? Great. Okay, so now that we have this class fixture, this is just an XUnit feature, we can now define a constructor that gets populated with an instance of that web application factory. So we can take a web application factory of program here, and let's call that factory, and it's control dot to get the factory. No, that's not control dot. Let's create a client property instead, and client, and we will take the factory and we will get a create a client. Okay, and now let's create a property that's based off of that instead. Let's do that. Great. So now we've got a property for our client. So this is a special client. This will invoke the entire web application for end to end. That's what it will do. Let's test it, see if it actually does anything. So let's make this async task. And let's do var result equals await. Let's take our client and do a get async. We'll just do it to the root. Just make sure the app kind of works. Let's make sure, let's do an assert. And what do we do? Assert.equal that the status code is an OK. Let's just make sure the status code is an OK. HTTP status code system.net.OK. All right, and we want that to be equal to the status code that was returned from our HTTP client request. Status code. Cool. That's all you got to do. And I'm missing a using for the task, and probably missing a semicolon someplace, but we will find out soon enough. So test, Windows Explorer. Let's run all the tests in our app, the whole suite. And spinning, and we're green. Okay, so that's how you can write full end-to-end tests. This is actually how we test the MVC framework a lot. We create these little functional apps and then just run the whole pipeline and make sure that the MVC features are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's MVC testing. That wasn't too bad. Okay, yes, but there's more. This one I am going to skip. I think this one's going to take. So web API controllers. We have a new set of conventions that you can apply to an API controller in your app. What this will do is we'll make your API controllers more descriptive and have less like attribute noise. Like today, you have to put from body attribute on the thing you want to come from the body, or from route, or from query. These conventions will just infer where the data is coming from by the signature of the method. So for example, if you have a complex type that you're taking into your web API action method, we'll assume that's coming from the body. If you have a simple type parameter that the name of it happens to match something coming from the route, we'll assume that's coming from the route. So you don't need to mark it. Everything else that's a simple type we will assume is from the query string. We'll also we'll require attribute routing, but we will handle validation errors for you. So you don't have to do that like, if model state isn't valid, then return a 400 bad requests or whatever. We'll just take care of that. So you don't have to have that code in your apps. And yeah, that's what it does. The other thing you can do is instead of returning iAction result everywhere, which is inevitably what you end up doing, like you'll have like a GET request that takes an ID, and normally it returns a product, but if the ID doesn't exist, you got to return a 404, which means you actually need to return iAction result. That's a little annoying. Instead, you can now return action result of T, so action result of product. And what that will mean is you can return T, or you can return action result. And we will do implicit conversion magic to make that work. And now your action method is descriptive. Like when you're generating Swagger documents, we can just look at the signature and see, oh, this thing returns a product, even though sometimes it might also return a 404 status code result. So that's what these guys are. You can try them out with like the item templates or the Web API project template in Visual Studio. So I'm going to skip this one because I have other stuff I want to talk about. HTTP Client Factory. This one's super cool. This is how you can manage and configure your HTTP client instances in a centralized way across your application. Maybe some of you have written an app where you let your developers write new up as many HTTP client instances as they wanted to. And then you end up with a performance problem because they exhaust the sockets on the server, and then you go read somewhere online like, oh, we were supposed to reuse them. And now you got to hunt them all down and make sure they're getting reused. Or maybe you had a situation where you had some resiliency issue with your system, and now you want to add retry logic everywhere that you're using one of those HTTP clients, but they're scattered all the way across your app, and you really would like to have a centralized way of adding retry logic. That's what HTTP Client Factory does for you. It is basically HTTP client as a service. By the way, the HTTP client in .NET Core 2.1 is blazingly fast. It has a completely new managed implementation. The number I hear, and they say it is 10 times faster, which is amazing. So a much faster HTTP client. You should definitely try that out. So HTTP Client Factory gives you a way to configure things centrally. You can add message handlers in a centralized way that then apply to all of your HTTP clients, or just specific named ones, or just ones that are being used by specific types through DI. Let me show you what I mean. OK, file new project. And this one, I think I'm going to show you a, let's do it. We can do it. Web app. Let's create a new web app. Let's create an app that talks to like a GitHub API. So GitHub API demo. And let's create a web application. That looks good. OK, so now what do I want to do here? I want to talk to the GitHub API. Maybe some of you have used this before. GitHub has actually a really nice API service that you can use to query for GitHub data. This is their docs. Like you can ask for information about specific users, for example. I'd like to create some code that calls this API and then displays some data about myself on a web page. So let's do that with the new HTTP client factory. OK, so in my services, remember, it's HTTP client as a service, basically. So services, let's add an HTTP client. OK? And in this case, my HTTP client is going to be used by a type that I'm going to define, which is a GitHub client. I'm going to create this type. In fact, I'm just going to generate the class right now. All right, and there it goes. Good. OK, now in here, I have the opportunity to configure the client however I'd like. And this is the client that will only be used by the GitHub client type. So client, what do we want to do here? Well, I know a few things. Like we want the base address to be the base address of the GitHub API. So let's get that from the docs. That would be this thing right there. So let's copy the base address for the GitHub API. Cool. Now what else do we want? We want, GitHub uses this versioning scheme where you have to send an accept header. So we need to set, let's set a default request header. And let's just add, let's do it this way, accept. And then let's specify the string. Oops, let's undo that because that did some crazy formatting. All right, great. Semicolon. And then I happen to know for a fact also that they require a user agent. If you just use the HTTP client without specifying a user agent, then they throw like 403 or something like that. So let's add a user agent. We can use whatever user agent we want. Let's use, who's a good agent? I think James Bond is a really good agent. He's kind of secretive, but he's good with children, I hear. So let's use him. All right, great. And there's the missing semicolon. I knew I would miss a semicolon. OK, so let's now go to our GitHub client. Let's make this thing public. And this is going to be a type that's actually available through DI. And it has access to the HTTP client instance that is being created for it through DI. So let's add a constructor. And in the constructor, let's take in an HTTP client that's going to get provided to us by this HTTP client factory service. Let's call it client, and let's just create that, and let's create a property for it. Cool. Now, what do I want on this GitHub client? I probably want something that's like, well, it's going to be async because we're talking over the web. So public async. It's a task. It's going to return like GitHub user is probably what I want. Let's generate a type for that as well. Did it do it? Yes, it did. Let's get the task namespace in there. And this is going to be what? Like get user. And it's going to take a username. That looks good. OK, what do we want to do in here? So we want to take the client. Let's get a result. And let's await client.get async. And this is where we need to know the URI of getting a user. What is that? So let's go look at the docs. I want to get a single user. So it looks like it's just /users and then the username. Cool. So let's use some string interpolation here. So /users, and let's just put the username right here. You really should do some URI encoding stuff there, but that's good enough for demo purposes. And then let's take the result and make sure that it was a successful status code. That's what we want. So that will throw if it wasn't like a 200. And then let's return. Let's await. We'll take the result.content. And we'll read the content as a JSON payload. So read as async of our GitHub user that we defined previously. Now, we need to go define that type. We haven't done that yet. But that should compile. It'll probably complain because the GitHub user is still internal. Yeah, it's still internal. So we need to define this type. That means matching some schema on GitHub. Like we got to implement a type that does all this. So I'm now going to no, I'm not going to hand implement that. That would be terrible. So I'm going to edit, paste special, little known feature, paste JSON as classes. You guys see that? So you can take like a JSON instance. I know. Like, it's not new. It's been around a little while. But so that will basically take a JSON instance, infer a schema from it, and generate a type. Wow, OK. Yeah. I think I have to do just make these booleans. I need these booleans to be nullable. I mean, it's not perfect, right? So I gotta take these date times and resolve them. But it's good enough. Good enough. Okay, so now I've got a GitHub user. Let's now use our GitHub client on the contact page. So let's go here. What do we want to do? Yeah. Let's go to contact. Let's go into the contact page and let's add another constructor. And here we'll take our GitHub client that we defined previously. Let's call it GitHub client. Let's create a property for that. Great. And then we should be, let's just use this message property down here. Let's print out some data. So name will be, we need to actually use the client. So var user equals await. This needs to be async task. Good. Await GitHub client dot get. It's a gh client dot get user, and I can pass in my 27th username. All right, and let's use it here. So user dot Why are you giving me the tell sense? I must be doing something. Yeah. Thank you. Where is it? It's in the GitHub user. I probably forgot to actually name this as a type. Okay, GitHub user. Great. Now we should have some goodness here. Yeah. Name. Excellent. And let's also just do my company. So company user dot company. Okay. Is that good? Did I do it? Okay, let's run it. Build succeeded. It runs. Let's go to the contact page. Name Daniel Roth, company Microsoft, coming down from GitHub. So that was, sure. So I created a typed client. I put it in DI. I told it, this client needs an HTTP client, and I want it configured this specific way. I then used that typed client from some other part of my app using DI, and that configuration for that client is now completely centralized. And you can do other things too. I won't show in full detail, but after this add HTTP client, you can add message handlers here. You see that? So if you want to have retry logic, using Poly, we actually have a new package that we have been working on with the Poly team. Poly is an open source framework for dealing with resiliency and retry logic and those types of concerns. We created a bunch of message handlers that implement retry logic and exponential fallback and those types of things. So definitely give that a try. We're not done. We're not done. Okay. What do we got? Performance. You see, yes, we are much faster than 2.0. In fact, we're much faster than the other popular frameworks out there. This is based off of the numbers on Tech Empower today. If you go look on Tech Empower for the plain text benchmark in particular, we blow Node and Java out of the water in terms of our throughput numbers on that particular benchmark. But of course, that's not good enough. In 2.1, we're about 10% faster on the micro benchmark style benchmarks, where you're basically just trying to turn out hello world as fast as you can. But what's really impressive to me, and I know the bars look the shortest, but that scenario on the far side, the short one, the fortune scenario is a fairly realistic scenario. You're exercising the data tier in that scenario, talking to a database and getting the data back and measuring throughput for that. We had a phenomenal perf boost that happened in 2.1, over 100%. And again, on that scenario, those numbers haven't been published publicly, but in our internal testing on the same hardware that they use for Tech Empower, we are significantly faster than any of the third-party stacks that you would normally think of to use in comparison to ASP.NET Core. So that's good news. Performance is good. We've also updated our SPA templates so that they are CLI friendly. You haven't already played around with these. We have built-in templates for using Angular, React plus Redux. You just file a new project, and it's all set up for you. You can get Webpack with hot module reload. You get source mappings already set up for the TypeScript. You just file a new project and use them. The new templates work great with the Angular CLI and the Create React App CLI patterns that are now common in those communities. So definitely check those out as well. They're fun to use. I'm not going to show them right now because, sometimes I just don't feel like writing JavaScript. I don't know about you, but there are just days where I wake up and like, I have to write a web app, and I just don't want to write JavaScript. Not that there's I don't personally feel like there's anything wrong per se with JavaScript. I think actually the JavaScript ecosystem and the community has come a huge way, and their ecosystem is phenomenal. Much to envy there, I think, in terms of things that we should be doing better with .NET. But I'm primarily a .NET developer. I'd rather be writing C#. And fortunately, the web community came together and defined this awesome new standard called WebAssembly. If you haven't heard of WebAssembly already, it is a low-level bytecode that is intended to be used as a compilation target that is now supported by all browsers. The idea is you can take like some C code or some C++ code or whatever code, you compile it to WebAssembly, and it runs in any browser at native speeds. And that is just super cool, because what that enables is it changes the way we can think about web development. Instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to write for the browser, now I have to write JavaScript. Well, there's actually all these other frameworks and tools and languages and ecosystems that you can now leverage, whether that's Go or Rust or Ruby or Python or C# or F#. As long as you can compile it to WebAssembly, then you can get it to run in any browser. So one of the things we've been working on is trying to get .NET to work really well with WebAssembly. What could we do to give you a full stack .NET web development solution? And so that's what Blazor is. The Scots showed this a little bit earlier. Blazor is an experimental project where we are getting .NET to run in the browser on top of a WebAssembly-based .NET runtime. We literally take a .NET runtime, compile it to WebAssembly, and run it in the browser, and then download your DLLs and execute them client-side. It requires no plugins. It requires no code transpilation. We're not taking your C# and turning it into JavaScript. It is just normal DLLs, normal .NET IL, executing in the browser with just open web standards. It works on all modern browsers, including mobile browsers. And some people ask us about the name. Well, the way you define components in Blazor is through using the Razor syntax, using CSS HTML files. So browser plus Razor is Blazor. Don't ask me where the L came from. Laser beams, I think? I don't know. Like you decide where that comes from. This is how it works. We take your C# code. We take your CSS HTML files. We turn those into classes. We take your C# code with the classes, and we compile that all into normal .NET assemblies. We download that into the browser with the .NET runtime DLLs, with the WebAssembly-based .NET runtime, and then just run it. So that's what I'm just going to show you in the last 3 minutes that I have on the talk before they kick me off stage, because we've got to see at least one more Blazor demo. OK. So the way you're going to get Blazor, if you haven't already got it yet, is you're going to want to go to blazor.net. OK? And then click on the Getting Started button. This is just a project site that we set up on GitHub Pages. This is an experimental project. It's not yet a committed product, but we would love for you to try it out to give us feedback on what you think about this direction. So go download the .NET Core 2.1 SDK. Go get the Blazor language service extension for Visual Studio, and then you will get some templates. So let's close this one, and let's look at this one. Great. So file new project. If I want to create a Blazor app, it is just this easy. So my Blazor app. OK, and you have two templates here. The first one is a standalone template that only runs client-side in the browser. It has no dependency on .NET on the server. The second one is ASP.NET Core hosted. So it actually has a ASP.NET Core backend and even a shared client library that you can use between the Blazor frontend and the backend, because Blazor supports .NET Standard. That's how we get libraries to work everywhere. I'll just create the standalone template just so you can see how you can do this yourself. Awesome. And I'm going to run it just so you can see it. It looks like our normal SPA templates. There it goes. We just actually updated them to use Bootstrap 4, so they're pretty. This button here, every time I click it, it's just refreshing the page with the count. Normally, that would require JavaScript. But every time I click that button, it's calling C#. It's calling .NET code running in the browser. Fetch data. This is actually issuing an HTTP client request to the server, pulling down some JSON data, deserializing it into .NET objects in the browser, and then using Razor syntax to render the page. If you want to see what the code looks like for that counter page, I'll show you that really quick. That's this guy right here. So counter is just normal Razor. It has some markup. There's a button, and there's the count. Here's your C# function for incrementing the count, and the onClick method, instead of pointing to JavaScript, is pointing to C#. If you don't believe me that it's actually .NET running in the browser, you can F12 and refresh the page and look at the network. Let's see what we see. So refresh. All right, so it looks like, I guess I can do that Control-4 dangerous thing again. So, CSS and JavaScript, normal, WebAssembly. So this is the .NET runtime. We are using Mono. Mono's the supported runtime for iOS, for Android, for Unity. It's a great client-side .NET runtime. We're using it for WebAssembly right now. And then DLLs. Like, there's my Blazor app.dll. That is my app. And it is being running client-side in the browser. That is Blazor. We would love for you guys to give it a try. And yeah. I'm happy to answer questions about it afterwards. But my time is almost done. So try out Blazor. There's the website. You can do it yourself. Like, every time I use Blazor, I feel like I can now write web applications. This is all the new features that are in ASP.NET Core 2.1. They're all available in the release candidate. Make sure you download and install it so you can get the poster. Why does the poster look so weird? That's a different version of the poster, I think, than the one they're actually giving away. There's lots of great talks on .NET. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I will be around to answer questions. You guys are great.